and bam, it just hit. There we go. Welcome back and thanks for joining me. If you've been following along, and you should be, and subscribe if you like what you see, you'll know that I've recently been able to get my 1977 Fiat 124 Spider to start for the first time in nearly 25 years, but not without issue. Cylinder number 3 has zero compression, and it was determined that there's a stuck valve on the intake side. But before I dive in on a head job, I decided to step on over to the interwebs and do a little research. I was surprised to find very little consensus on the interference characteristics of this motor. It's really hard for me to understand how nobody knew for sure, although many thought they were certain, that the interference would occur when the timing belt was removed. Many informed me that the camshaft would be destroyed, the valves would be bent, the pistons would be marred if this engine was turned without a timing belt. Others simply stated that yes, the service manual stated this is an interference engine that simply referred to the fact that the accessory gear would come in contact with the crankshaft of the pistons, but that the valve reliefs on the tops of the pistons were enough to prevent collision between the valves and the tops of the pistons. But nobody knew for sure, and I couldn't find a clear answer, although I do believe that yes, it's likely that this is an interference engine and I have a stuck valve, which is probably bent, which is a good sign, but not clear evidence of interference. So before I repair that stuck valve, we're gonna do a little experiment and we're gonna put the whole issue to bed. And I'm gonna spin the engine without the timing belt on, and I'm gonna spin the camshafts without the timing belt on, and I'm gonna get a camera as close as possible, and we're gonna watch the pistons smash into the valves. So let's all learn together and see what happens.
To the beat and I ain't ever coming down. Everywhere I go, I'm in the spotlight. This is a good life. I'm living bold. This is what it looks like. On the tip to top of the world.
Okay, so I've prepped the engine a little more for head removal. I've got the valve covers off, as you can see, and the timing belt's removed. And I'm ready just to do a little simple test to confirm the interference characteristics of this twin cam, overhead twin cam 4-cylinder that's so popular on these Fiats and other Italian cars. So as we look a little closer, I'm gonna go ahead and set this is the exhaust valve side. I'm gonna go ahead and set the cam so that the number 1 exhaust valve is fully seated, or is fully extended into the piston, into the cylinder rather. So you can see now I have that completely, that spring, the valve spring is completely collapsed, and as we can see on the bore scope, the valve is completely, I can just about slip the bore scope into the cylinder through that valve. It's open all the way. It's penetrating down into the cylinder, set into the engine. Okay, so next I'm gonna go ahead and gently rotate the crank to bring the piston to the top dead center position, okay? Get my crank nut. So you're not gonna be able to see a whole lot here. We're just gonna gently, I'm not sure, and we can watch it on the bore scope as I crank to see that the piston's in fact coming up. And as I crank, okay, it's moving slowly, slowly. You can see the exhaust valve is still down. Okay, so we're gonna crank it. And there it stopped, okay? And I could just barely hear a tap as the piston has come in contact with the exhaust valve. All right? So, by definition, by the most strictest sense of the term, this is indeed an interference engine, as many have claimed correctly. So, there we have it. Go ahead and just back that out a little, take the contact off. Now, one thing to note, which is interesting, when the cam is in its most relaxed state, so now it's completely, the pressure is equally off the valve springs. Every valve is only partially or not compressed at all. Okay, so when the valve is in that position, and this is what happened in my previous video when I rotated the crank through. Many of you claim that by turning the crank without a timing belt, it will damage the engine. That is not true. When the timing belt is removed and the cams are in the relaxed position, which is the position they will return to due to the pressure of the springs, watch what happens when I start to rotate the crank. Okay, get my crank nut back on. Okay, start rotating. Look at that. No interference whatsoever. Okay, so at this point, the valves are lifted out of the cylinder sufficiently for the pistons to move up and down without coming into contact. So, by that measure, I did not do any damage to the engine personally, which is good to know. You'll quite easily feel, just by gently turning with your hand, any minor contact is very apparent. So as long as you stop before you damage it, you'll be just fine. Here it comes. Oh, joy. Hey. All right, that one came out. Success number one. Go. Okay, inspection time. The head came out pretty easily. Definitely a one-man job. Not impossible for sure. And just all I've done is just a quick wipe down. I haven't done anything else except just rag it off just to get a look at what's going on in here. And I don't see any obvious signs of damage, but overall I'm pleased with the condition besides the filth. I think it's gonna clean up nice. Let me show you the top end here. You can see it's incredibly bad in there. just completely crystallized, and I have to figure out how to get that out of there, what I can soak in there. I don't know if you guys have any opinions. If you've done anything like that where you've ran into this problem and you need to get that cleaned out, what have you done? Please let me know. Otherwise, let's take a look underneath here. If I can lift it up, I can see enough light. Just take a look at some of the valve situations. While I got it off, it makes sense to go ahead and just pull all the valves, clean them, check them, and see where we go from there. But we'll give it a spin through first. I want to check everything while it's all together, see if there's anything worth saving, worth keeping, or worth just going all in on. So that's where we're at as far as that goes. We're going to dive into that next. We'll see what we can go from there.
Got soul coming through, flying free, skies are blue. Pull the weeds and make some room. I got soul coming through, won't stop feeling the feeling on top of the world. Can't walk to the beat when you see me come and make some room. Everywhere I go, I'm in the spotlight. This is a good life.
Okay, here we are. I've been able to pull the valves without much effort and just trying to play detective on what happened to this vent valve to see what's going on. But as you can see, it's pretty clearly number 3 valve here for the intake side is got quite a lean to it. And just examining the valve itself, I cannot see any obvious signs of abuse or damage or impact on the top or the bottom. Obviously it's dirty and I've just wiped it off gently, but so as I look now in the underside, I did see a little chip here on the exhaust side, which could indicate some foreign object might have been fallen in maybe through the intake and causing some damage. But I don't see any obvious signs of impact around the valve seat for the intake side, but it could have been enough, I suppose, to cause it to bend. Still not 100% sure. There's no sign of impact on the piston itself, so it's kind of a mystery. I'm still leaning towards the fact now that I see this that something may have come into the cylinder from the top and caused it to bend. Regardless, new valves are en route. We'll have all new parts to put on in the next video. We'll get this cleaned up, the bottom of the head, the top of the block. We'll get everything buttoned back up, and otherwise I don't see any obvious signs of head gasket failure or any other really serious problems with this from my untrained eye at least. And I think I'm happy with just getting it put back together. So we'll do all that in the next video. Thanks again for joining me. If you guys like what you see, please consider subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.